This is Airglow, and you're listening to Paradise Arcade.
The Paradise Arcade may contain explicit content. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to the Paradise Arcade with Eric and Kyle. Welcome to another episode of the Paradise Arcade. We are back from a little bit of a break. This week we have a very special guest, the mysterious Airglow. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, as we're discussing previously, before we started recording, talking about how I felt dumb for not hearing about your music earlier, especially with what we were talking about a little bit earlier about the genre called Datawave. And it's really great that we get to connect at this time because Memory Bank, your album, is approaching its 10-year anniversary. Andrew just did a tape release of the 10-year anniversary edition of that just went live today as we're speaking, and that looked like it went exceedingly well. How does that feel coming up on a 10-year anniversary of that album?
It's real trippy. Obviously so grateful, and it's so cool. It's just 10 years is a lot's happened, it seems like, and it's crazy to look back and see what has become,
Absolutely. I mean, when you released it, was this like a collection of songs that were put together for an album? Did you have an album in mind when you put it together, or did it kind of just piece together?
Well, I wrote those songs all at around the same time, within the same year. That was back whenever SoundCloud was what SoundCloud was, super amazing. I was just at that time really wanting to make music, so I just made music and posted it on SoundCloud, not really planning on putting them necessarily together unless my friends wanted a tape or something. So I hadn't planned on it being a cohesive album.
So it's cohesive in the sense that it is all come together in a similar time frame, but not necessarily thematically conscious. You didn't sit down and go, I'm going to write a set of songs that's all going to tie into a theme, and it's going to express whatever intention. Is just you're making music, digging it.
I tried to place the track listings right and lead them into each other right. So it was I was surprised at how in the end they did come together.
Can we talk a little bit about what drove you to sit down and make music? How did Memory Bank come together? What was the I guess the point where you're like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to make music?
Well, at that time I had two other roommates that also made similar music, and we were just all making music in our rooms, and we put together a tape that we gave to a bunch of our friends, and that was mostly what the inspiration was, outside of the musical inspiration from, also my roommates inspired me to make music because they made really tight music.
That's awesome. Was there any particular, was there any other musical or movie influences that helped inspire the tracks, or was it the being around other musicians that helped drive you?
There were some sci-fi movies that I can't remember to this day what they were. Um, I remember The Keep was one of them. Um, and obviously at that time, like chill wave had just like started, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
word chill wave. um, like Washed Out and like Neon Indian and obviously Calm Trues. After I heard NDK, I was like, all right, I kind of want to make something that sounds like this.
Did you grow up, being an avid music fan? Did you listen to, like you talk about chillwave entering the consciousness around that time? Were you listening to other types of music? Because, obviously, like sort of proto earlier music of like Aphex Twin, like the Warp record folks.
Oh yeah, sure. It took me a while to start to enjoy electronic music. I had grown up playing guitar and I was really into like the 60s scene, you know?
Yeah.
Really loved Bob Dylan in high school. And like eventually, and like I ended up going to music school for like production. And that was kind of where I started learning how to make a computer an instrument, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then I started understanding like, oh, okay, I've just been ignorant all these years for like thinking that, like a synthesizer isn't an instrument or something, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think, that mindset, and I don't think it's always malicious. It's that mindset of like, if you're like a guitar purist, if you're doing folk music or rock music or whatever it is, that you tend to be a disciple of that thing. And when you have a synthesizer, which can be so alien, so because a guitar sound is a guitar sound. Obviously you have different makes of the instrument, and the different wood tones and strings can add different sounds. But it's like you hear guitar, it's always a guitar. With the synthesizer, you don't even know what you're hearing sometimes because the sounds are so alien, and that could be really intimidating and off-putting, I guess. And I'm just used to, like, in my life, not necessarily having to apologize or to justify, but people are like, oh, you like electronic music, that beep boop stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so much more complex and interesting. And once you get into that headspace and start to accept a different way of doing things, I think there's so much there to explore.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, a lot of it was just ignorance. Like I just didn't know what it was. You listen to Dark Side of the Moon and you don't know what a synthesizer is. You just you accept these sounds as just like sounds. You don't really think about like where they're coming from.
Right. And like early 80s movies or 80s movies where the synthesizer is basically almost part of the sound design of the movie. So you have no idea. You're just like, it made a sound. It's either terrifying or it adds to the whatever scene, but you couldn't know that it was made by a synthesizer necessarily.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about sci-fi movie inspiring you a bit when you were starting to put this together. Is there anything, like, did you grow up watching sci-fi or any? I find your background going into this musically so fascinating. I'm just curious what other.
Well, the biggest thing, I didn't watch a lot of movies. I spent most of my childhood skateboarding, so a lot of skate videos, which led me to like making music in the first place, you know?
Mm-hmm. And then you went to school for music production. I'd imagine that got you into like music editing software and things of that nature.
Yeah. Composing like on in Logic, like on a track
Hmm.
kind of basis, like started back whenever like I had first started like making music. That was really easy to do,
Hmm.
like compose on like that kind of timeline.
Right.
It gets harder though.
It certainly does. And that's really, it's not the first time that I've heard someone say, well, I grew up skateboarding or, whatever. And I've come into this when basically I'm a young adult already in college or whatever it is, and then started to explore these things. You're a bit of an enigma because, you made these songs, put them together, being compiled into an album, and then kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
So, can we talk a little bit about like your intentions with the releasing of what ended up being Memory Bank and kind of what happened after that?
Um, yeah, sure. Um, well, like I said, I had no intentions. I didn't intend on this ever really, uh, ever being like released like on vinyl. Like that's the craziest thing,
Mm-hmm.
Like after I put it out, I mean, it was such an amazing feeling, like kindred spirits, like what I do. This feels really good. But um, I think after that release, I had a really hard time writing again. I didn't necessarily know where to go from there,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that if it wasn't for like the quote unquote success, I probably would have ended up making a couple more songs,
Mm-hmm.
I think I kind of got a little scared, and I
Okay.
kind of felt like I definitely like put myself in a box because I kind of felt like people wanted me to make this kind of music, so this is who I am now.
Yeah, I could totally get how that would be really, you know, a difficult position to be in. Because I mean, I'm guessing like you put the album together as sort of just this experiment to just make music to see what maybe you can do, and you obviously have some key influences, and then it was never really meant to be for consumption almost necessarily.
Yeah. Well, in my mind, I was just kind of making it like to exist in the ether, just to like get it out of me,
Yeah.
not really expecting anybody else to like necessarily take it in.
Hmm. I absolutely get that as just as part of a being a creative person, getting something out of your, it's like a thought that you can't get rid of. And like I think, I think about my own creativity and whether or not it's like a passing thought or something that I need to sit down with. It's like, if it doesn't go away, you need to excise it in some way, whether it's a thought or a song or whatever it is, a feeling, so that you can kind of move on.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so like you put the time in, the energy into this creative endeavor just to get it out, just to be done with it, so you can like move on to other stuff.
Yeah,
Um, and so that's kind of sounds what like this project was for you.
yeah. And afterwards, I mean, I still released a few tracks on
Mm-hmm.
Strat Records compilations.
Yep.
Fucking Simulation Sunrise was like right after Memory Bank. And I always liked that song a lot more than I have liked most of my songs. Um, and I think like there was a honeymoon period after that, and I was excited to get back to work and hopefully make something else. But I didn't want to make something worse, so
Right.
um, there was a lot of pressure that I was kind of putting on myself, and it ended up taking uh, a lot longer to write just one song, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. For you, does creativity come in like kind of mad bouts where like you have a bunch of creative energy or thoughts and then you're able to focus more, or like how does that creativity work for you? Like I'm curious.
Well, that's one of the hard things about me that I've grown to learn is that maybe I mean I can be a little impatient, um, and when I'm like forcing it, then I'm gonna maybe try this idea out for like a second, try to write like, you know, maybe like a chord progression, maybe a melody, and then and then it doesn't work, and then I move on to the next one, and then that doesn't work. You know, it was just I have tons of unfinished songs, so many of them. Um, and when I was finishing, I was focused on the end point. I was wanting to release it, you know, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just sitting in the realm of creating forever without really necessarily ever needing to finish, or I should say, experimenting. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
I mean, that to me, that's like what it was all about for me was like experimenting with uh, thoughts and emotions, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and sounds.
Music, in some regards, I would almost describe is cinematic, and I think, and what I mean that is when you sit down and listen to any of those tracks, you have an emotional journey that you take with the songs. Like it takes you in a place through a soundscape, and brings in a heightened sense of emotion, and then out. And I think with electronic music, what's difficult, and I think a lot of people don't understand with the difference between something that's like really good electronic music versus maybe things that are not as good, is that you don't have a vocalist to tie a music or a song together, right? Vocalists singing words, so they're eliciting an image with their words that they're using with the lyrics, and then with the melodies and how they're singing it and their cadence. Like the voice is an incredibly complex instrument and could kind of carry songs, whereas like when you have no vocalist, the entire song is carried on the music alone.
Right.
And I think one of the things that Memory Bank does really well is that I think there's this emotionality to it. It's not cold, it's not lifeless, if you will. It doesn't feel like it's a musical cue or a piece of commercial thing. It really has each song has its own thing that it's expressing. And I think, like, to me, when I was looking, I'm like, when did this come out? And I'm like, holy shit, like, it's very impressive. It stands up there in my mind with some of the best musical releases, and then just it being so unique and interesting, because there's one artist you mentioned that had a similar ish sound, but that's it. When it came out, there's really nothing that sounded like it. And now we're getting to this place where I think there's a lot younger artists that are coming out that are tying into people like Comtrues and are an influence to them, and maybe some of the other Stratford guys and some of these other artists coming around that are making music that are like that. So now there's this sort of like Memory Bank comes back into the fore of being one of the first albums sort of in this genre. What do you think about this album, like now that it's like almost 10 years coming, not just back in the swing of like it's 10 years, but it's also like this style now is becoming something more widely sought after and reproduced.
Yeah. Um, I was surprised that there weren't many people trying to make that kind of sound, you know? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it did kind of happen pretty recently. It's, I don't know, music is music, and they happen like in a time, I don't know, you can use a bunch of plugins and like make your music sound like it came from the 70s, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's all been done before,
Right.
and so it's really important to add your own individual like take on it
Right.
if you have one.
Yeah, it's one of those. I heard this quote from Rick Rubin, who said, basically, like, there's no, exactly what you're saying. There's no original music. It's all been done before. How you, as an artist, do something that could be noticed is that you combine things that haven't been combined before. We're all sort of
Right.
remixers, style remixers in a sort of way. And so, the great, if you want to talk about like a film person, like Quentin Tarantino is a great remixer of ideas, smashing all
Mm-hmm.
different things together to create his movies. And he commands, pop culture extremely well. And I think same thing with like, you take that into music, people that can put things together. And I think you coming from, the guitar background and something that isn't tied culturally to this scene. And I think that's so refreshing because it shows that people can get to like memory bank, like an album like that, without having to have all the same sort of checkered, like, you like Blade Runner, you like, Vangelis, you like,
Oh yeah, I love
Marauder,
Vangelis.
and you're John Carpenter, and you have like these checklists of influences, and then you put out influenced by those things.
Oh
And
yeah, Blue Shift came out, like, I mean, I wrote that song like after listening to Jean-Michel Jarre on a little bit of a psychedelic experience, and then I uh, just really wanted to make like a space journey song, you know.
yeah,
And that funny thing, like I always liked that song. The chord progression's weird, and I didn't know if it worked, you know.
mm-hmm.
And still to this day, sometimes I listen to it, I'm like, does this fucking work? I don't know. People like it though, you know.
Yeah, yeah, because it's successful in what it's doing. It doesn't. I hear you talking about chord progressions, and so obviously going to school for music, you have a command of music theory, I'm assuming, and
Yeah,
song structures and how that works. Um,
yeah.
do you when you were making that music, did you sit down with like a chord progression in mind and then I'm going to use this instrument or this thing to express it, or did you find the sound and the tone and then make the song out?
A little bit of both. Well, for some reason, I always chose to start with the chord progression, and everybody knows those are fucking impossible to come up with if you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to like find something that sounds like you've never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
You're just gonna end up choosing a bunch of chords that don't go together, you know.
Right.
Um, um, yeah, there were a couple times whenever I was, I had just been experimenting with chord progressions for way too long, and I was like, all right, I'm just choosing these three and I got to keep going. you know
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, this the sounds, I mean, like the patches for sure helped me like gauge where this is gonna end up going,
Mm-hmm.
or how like sustained the chords are, like fills up more space than if they're like short and plucky kind of,
Right.
have a lot of delay on them. So, yeah, there's, yeah, a little bit of both, man.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I think, I don't know that one person. It's rare that I find that one person says, I start making music the same way every single time.
Yeah.
I know that like some people are more inclined to do it because that's just their discipline of music, the way that they learned how to do it. So that it's more maybe of a knowledge handicap, especially like people who don't know music theory as much. They feel their way through it, or they set up a way.
And they make good shit too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. Knowledge is a double-edged sword, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had for some reason I just kept on thinking like, oh well, if I just like learn more about it, it'll just get easier. And I mean, that being said, it like in a lot of ways it does, because now if I have an idea, I'm able to execute it quickly. But it doesn't help with the internal conversations of, is this the right way to go with this? Do I want to go somewhere else with this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's infinite directions you can take anything, and shit's overwhelming.
Yeah.
That will fucking lead to paralysis.
Analysis paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's really good and interesting, points that you bring up, and with your background, it really kind of sounds like in a way that like this album was a time and place where there's all these crossroads for you, where these like special things that happened to make this thing come to real life. And then when it was released, and then people were like, I really like this. And obviously, it was successful. And then you're talking about how you felt trapped by making this style of music. Was it when you got done with Memory Bank, were you like, okay, like let's just pretend there wasn't any like response to it? Would you have gone and done something different and just thrown away? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wanted to make something that sounded like Mac DeMarco. I wanted to do a lot of musical ideas. But I don't know, just that taste of that response was I don't know, like for a little bit I was questioning whether or not like I'm cut out for this.
Mm-hmm.
Like creating is really, like, I find so much enjoyment out of creating something from nothing. And I find that I'm happier whenever I don't expect anything to come from it. And I can just like let those ideas freely flow,
Yeah. I mean, it's really, I'm sad a little bit for you, because it seems so soul crushing. You would just create and not really give a shit about what other people thought about it, right? Because like at the end of the day, like, and I'm gonna do another Rick Rubin quote, but like success comes when you feel good enough to release it.
I love Rick Rubin. I got his book too, and that shit is like so good. Yeah, it was. I don't know. Yeah, at the time, no one needs to feel sorry for me. I did all that shit to myself.
Right. Hey, sorry for interrupting. I hope that you're enjoying the episode so far, and that when you're done listening to it, that you'll tell us about it. You'll leave a comment. You'll like our page. You'll like the episode post. You'll share it. You repost it. You do all those things. All that kind of engagement makes a big difference for what we do. We want to hear from you. at the end of the day, it's as much about community engagement as it is about anything else. So all of those things, commenting, liking, sharing, following us, it all matters. We also have a Patreon where you can contribute as much or as little as you want. There is some exclusive content on there, and we will continue to update that. But know that your contribution goes back 100% into the show. I'm not going to ramble on. Kyle and I would just like to say thank you for listening, whether it's your first time or you've caught all the episodes. Thank you. So without further ado, let's get back to the episode.
It's a motherfucking paradise arcade.
I don't regret doing that either.
Mhm.
I mean, I had a feeling that I would do that anyway. I don't know, like I was at the time, like there's this James Murphy has this interview thing on YouTube, and he's talking about LCD Sound System and how it didn't start till he was like 32. And he was saying about how like he had seen a lot of younger musicians getting a lot of success at a young age before they're like mature enough to handle it, and they kind of fell off because they couldn't handle it, you know?
Yeah.
And for me, like I had to, you know, dig myself in a hole in order to like get out of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like in all that, I got a little lost in Buddhism, and I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, I found a lot of really helpful things in the philosophy, but it overall didn't lead me to like move, to keep moving, you know?
Yeah.
I was just kind of complacent and letting things happen because I don't know. I mean, isn't that like what life is anyway? Like, aren't we just like, isn't life just happening to us, you know?
Yeah, I mean, in a large extent, and kind of like, you know, as I'm, you know, hearing you talk about things around the development of the album and kind of everything, it does seem like, you know, in some way it happened to you, and then and then the next chapter begins. The next thing happens, the transition of whatever that is. It was a transitory moment, if you will. You also, though, played live and supported the music a bit too. And you had a show recently with Com Truce, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that shit was so wild. I mean, like, even part of me was thinking like, oh, I'm gonna have to listen to all these songs again and like get them like together, and it seemed like a lot of work, and I was wondering whether or not I like had the energy and like wanted to do it, but I don't know.
How did that come together?
My 22-year-old self would never forgive me if I did that. So
how did that come together? I mean, it just seemed like, you know, radio silence for so long, and then like I saw like Airglow's playing with Com Truce. What the fuck?
Yeah, that was because a friend of mine works for the venue that he was coming to, and she was like, "Hey, Com Truce is coming. Do you want to open for him?" And I was like, yeah, sure." And like, I don't know, he might come back next year, and I might open for him again. Who knows?
Did you have it?
Apparently, that's been said that I might do it again.
That's awesome. Did you have a chance to chat with Seth?
Yeah, I did. He's a great guy. He's hilarious. Yeah, I had talked to him just about, like, he came and had a show in Oklahoma one time, and I had just asked him how did he get the kick sound in VHS sex, and we just like talked about gear for a long time. He was really cool then, and that was 5 or 6 years ago. And then I saw him a couple months ago, and I was like, "Yo, dude, you remember me?" Like, he didn't, but it's all
Well,
good. Yeah,
he's,
sure. I mean, obviously not. Yeah.
the dude does tours a lot and sees a lot of people, interacts with a lot of people, and like,
Oh yeah, yeah. His flight was also like late, so tensions were like high in the venue. They were like, oh god, like I had to like go on a little later and shit, you know.
yeah.
But it was fun. Yeah, we took some shots after it. He's a great guy.
So how was it then revisiting that material, playing it live, having people react to it again? What was that effect on you?
Well, I will say that the patience paid off. I like, I made those songs so long ago, and like at the time, in my state at least, like my group of friends like knew that I did that, and they were like supportive, but they didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, I didn't really like talk about it all the time.
Right.
And so like, it's not like they didn't take me seriously or anything, but like, I don't know, that night it was just like all of these people that I've known for 10 years are like now seeing like this, and they were all so fucking supportive. It was an amazing night. It was beautiful. It was awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad, like, that's always a beautiful thing to have people come out and support you, especially people that friends and family. And you also did shows back in the day with Andrew, didn't you?
Yeah, I went up to San Diego and hung out with them a few times. There was like in Fresno, I think it was. There was like some it was like a festival thing. I played on a roof. It was also such a tight night. That shit was fun as fuck.
Have you? So you had that experience with Seth, obviously. Have you? What has it done to your current mental state with music? Has that kicked loose any sort of desire to play live or create, creatively at all?
Yeah, it has. Well, I want to change my name.
Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't liked the name, kind of ever. I had the name just because, well, whenever I was like, me and my roommates put out like that tape, I just had to come up with a name really quick, so I just chose it. And for some reason, I just held on to it whenever I was posting things on a SoundCloud. Well, not at the time, I didn't hate it, but I definitely want to continue on this path, and like for some reason it feels like maybe getting a new name offers more freedom, more leeway into like you don't know me yet,
right?
Kind of like, it's like, but then again, I mean, that's silly because if people like my music, then they should be supportive of my decisions into making it, right?
It's such an interesting thing you bring up, because I struggle with this myself, like the same kind of idea, because you sort of build a following and you release things under a moniker or a name, and then when you start to want to do different things or explore different ideas, it could feel like you're trapped, because you feel like, and again, I think from my just me personally, it's like it's a self pressure, right? I'm the one saying, well, people expect me to do XYZ. I have to stay within this thing, otherwise, what am I? But then if I'm starting all over again, then what? It's the same kind of the thing. And like what you're saying, if people like what you do, then it shouldn't really necessarily matter how you frame it. Like Neon Indian, it's just now Alan Palomo, right? Like he got rid of the moniker. And
George Clinton, too.
So I mean, like, hey, all that makes sense. Like in some ways, that makes complete sense, because it's them. And you're not the first person that I've talked to who's like really thought about like, I want to do something different. Like this, it's like a mental closing of a book, if you will. Like, this name represents this thing, and I am now different, and I want a different thing for what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And it's not even necessarily about other people at that point. It's really just like helps you frame going forward what you want to do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I don't know, at the time I hadn't done like the work on myself. Like I hadn't really like learned to like love myself, you know? And so I couldn't understand how anybody could ever love me. So obviously like I went to the root of like, well, I'm a person who creates something, so like that's why people like me. And if what I make is garbage, then like I don't what is the point in like what am I good for, you know? But that was because I was like living in my room working like 10 hours a day trying to just like write something, and I wasn't experiencing life. I didn't go walk to the coffee shop ever, you know. I just drank 2 large 7-Eleven coffees all day, you know, like never really left my room, didn't experience much of anything. But then a few years later, like I found like a cool group of friends that just liked me for me, and like told me that like, yo, you don't like, we just like you because you're you. You don't have to do anything, you know?
Yeah.
Which is to me that was the most freeing part, because I was able to like take a step back and not be so close to like what I do. The whole like what I do is what I am thing like fucking tore me apart, you know?
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, I'm just like a guy who likes to create shit, you know?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And it sounds like, has that helped you relieve some of that pressure of like being able to be creative? Do you feel like are you writing again, or are you getting to that point? Like, where are you at currently?
Yeah. Well, okay, so that in that area, yes, it absolutely did. It doesn't necessarily help with the workflow though. And now I'm more, I mean, I like for the past few years I've been really focusing on like building synthesizers, you know. The all the schematics are like online for free, and you can just fucking trace them yourself, and you get like 5 PCBs for like $4. And I just want like a wall of opportunity or like, you know, options. But I understand that more tools does not make it easier.
Right.
But that being said, I am trying to, I can't do it on a computer anymore. I need like a MIDI sequencer. I need like there to be like a brain to things that happens like in a time, like not like, I don't know, writing music in Logic or in Ableton is like so hard for me to do now, because it doesn't happen in the moment, and you're like every step of the way you're thinking, how is this going to sound with all the things that I added onto it, you know? And like you're thinking about the future. Like music happens like right now, it's happening right now. That's all that, you know. And the more synthesizers I have, I'm trying to build a drum machine as well, and if I can just get that shit going, then like the music's gonna come for sure, you know. I love making it, and I love like when it's flowing. But yeah, workflow for me is really important for me to not like overthink,
Yeah.
overanalyze, you know?
I have a friend who, writes a lot of music and is fairly prolific. And, when I ask him or someone asks him, how do you write so much music? His answer always comes down to workflow. Manage your workflow.
Yeah.
If you sit down and set yourself up for success and you do the thing, it will come.
Fuck yeah. Patience, man. I mean, yeah. And like magic, dude. That shit is magical. And like if you can make your room a magical environment, then it's gonna come. It has to.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's exciting. I mean, I think, it's such a interesting place for you now. We've got a thing, an anniversary of a thing that represents a very specific time in life for you, but you're also in this new frame of life and existence and opportunities and creativity. And I think that's a really cool place to be, like.
Yeah, I agree.
Having something unique be appreciated. I won't confirm, but I know that, there's talk about repressing Memory Bank onto vinyl again. And, that's exciting and that's great. That they'll be the third, because you had a Q-Rates or Crates run, Stratford, and then possibly another one, like, and having it be sought after and respected in that way. And then also just being like, you're doing your stuff now, and like making machines, making synthesizers. That's such a wild leap for me.
Dude.
Like,
I don't know, through those years of like endlessly trying to like create something, probably like, I don't know, like went through a couple ego deaths, and they were great for me. I no longer feel the need to like do things because of other people. Now I just want to do things for other people. And I want to make instruments that make it easier for people to make music. I mean, like, that's like now where I'm more focused at is like the whole technical side of things. I mean, in a lot of areas, like I know that I would be happy for the rest of my life just trying to figure out like how this one line of code works or something. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. But going to like the building of synthesizers, it brings it to a more of a feeling in the moment, tactile thing, and less of a logical coding, forward thinking thing. And I've noticed that progress a lot from folk who, they get into making electronic music in the box because that's the cheapest way to get started, obviously.
Sure.
And then as they progress, they go out and they get these pieces of hardware, and then it just changes them.
Oh yeah. I mean, that shit is there's no right or wrong way at all. It's mostly just it's like these are all tools to like make shit happen. And if one of them isn't making anything happen, then like try something else,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going back to what, like the earlier thing of like synthesizers are a thing of infinite possibilities. And when you are tuned into that and you make it less about being maybe scared of the knobs and the stuff, and then tune into your own creativity with that, you become one with it.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah. And experimenting leads to knowledge, You can understand this thing eventually if you just keep fucking twiddling those knobs, Like, it's important to do it because it's fucking fun and not because it's like gonna lead to anything, Like, it should be fun. And that's why I ended up, I mean, I don't know, like after that, like, you know, in the years, I fucking definitely stopped enjoying like not only making music, but just fucking listening to it. Like I couldn't listen to music anymore because it was like, I didn't know how to. I was like, whenever I was listening to music, I was like listening to it way too hard and like trying to like see what they were doing with it, or what that chord progression was, or what drums those are, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like um viewing it as like an engineer, like a producer, as opposed to like a musician or just a lover of music. And that's what is very hard about making music alone on your computer, is you are both the producer and the musician.
Right.
Very difficult.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate that that writer's block, and it's the difficulty, I should say, not writer's block, because you can have all the ideas in the world, but you know, like when you're being two things at once, how that could be really difficult to overcome, and how like having to blow apart the way you think about and the way you interact with music has to change in order to get back into a whole place to be able to create.
Yeah, I had to take a break, man. I mean, I had to. If I had kept on doing that, I would have like, it felt like my brain was gonna explode. Like I I mean, I don't know, the definition of insanity, right, is like doing something over and over expecting a different like, you know, outcome.
Mhm.
Like if that's true, then I was fucking insane for like 3 years, because I was like I was doing the same. I mean, I was just like maybe going to the exact same chords, maybe going to the same sounds, patches, drums, fucking all in the same tempo, you know, like expecting it to just work. And um I mean, a lot of times they probably did work, and I was just like too impatient to see it through because I was, you know, not well at the time, I guess, you know?
Yeah. And one of the things that I admire about you, and it makes total sense having now chatted with you, is your lack of presence on social media. To not have that burden, if you will, like I got mad respect for. Did you have a social media thing at some point in time for Airglow and then got rid of it, or did you just never start?
I never started.
That's smart.
My Instagram is my personal Instagram.
Right.
That's the only social media that I would go to.
Yeah.
Is Instagram. I mean, fucking Twitter. No one gives a shit about what I have to say. I don't know. But yeah, well, okay. So I don't know if there's a lot to admire. You said that you admired that. I don't know. Like, that mostly just came from like social anxiety. It wasn't really like a statement against anything, you know. I mean, that being said, I do have my own thoughts on like what that shit does, and instant gratification is like not helping anybody.
No.
And sometimes people don't need to know every fucking thing about you, and sometimes it's nice to like finish something before you quote unquote release it. And like the whole sharing your work in progress thing, I had a really hard time doing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that can like force you into like releasing something for sure. And maybe that's part of like the pressure that comes from like deadlines that aren't the deadlines that you set for yourself. I believe leads to mediocrity. And I had a real hard time with that. I mean, like after the whole music thing, I started, I mean, always been really interested in like visual art and like making music videos. And eventually I found myself in the same hole, the workaholism, perfectionism, like thing. And I found myself caring as much about this than I did with music. And in a cutthroat industry like that, like it's like hard to stay afloat. Like if you're like prone to caring about what you do, you know, like, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think, you know, in a way, maybe unconsciously, you protected yourself.
Oh yeah,
you know, like
for
maybe
sure.
not necessarily having a mission statement of like, I'm not going to do this at all because I don't want to, but like just the instinct to stay away. And, you know, because like,
yeah, it's the opposite of an accountability. Like having an accountability buddy, like, dude, like scares the shit out of me, dude. You know,
because like
I like to take my time.
Because, you know, like 10 years ago, you know, is a much more innocent time, right? Things weren't. It was more almost like a curiosity. Like we were all figuring it out, and like, what could it be? And all these kind of exciting little avenues, and you can find, you know, before everything became commoditized and bought out, and algorithms that basically, you know, support addiction essentially.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
And it's just like a nope, you know, like, and there used to be great things, you know, SoundCloud used to be a really great platform.
Fuck yeah.
To share ideas in a safe space and have interactions. And before that, it was, you know, MySpace in the early aughts. I remember using
these things aren't inherently bad, you know, like sometimes, I mean, it's just really important for every individual to like emotionally check themselves.
Yeah.
And like realize like, oh, maybe I just by me doing this all the time, like I'm hurting me, and by me hurting me, I'm hurting others, you know, like the ones around me that love me and don't think that I need to fucking feel like a piece of shit or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. And the whole, like, I don't know. I know like a lot of artists have the thing where it's like paint like a painting every day for 30 days. It's like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? Like, how do you do that? Why would you even do that? Like, I mean, if it's for the likes, that's fine. I don't know. Like, if it's like, if you're just trying to get an ego boost, there's nothing wrong with that until you start diluting yourself, you know? And like, it's good to know like what your fucking intentions are with this thing that is important, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's not to be taken lightly because shit fucking matters.
Yeah, I personally have a struggle with it where because I think in a way like setting up minor confines to yourself of like letting go, right? Like it's so easy to like stick on an idea forever and then you're paralyzed, where like if you set up like an exercise, like a pretense to say I'm going to do a painting every day and then it's done, and you in that ability to let it go, right? You let that thing go, that idea go, and then you're done. That is a total like, hey, I can respect that, but like pursuit of
I mean, yeah, for sure.
the pursuit of what you're saying, the pursuit of likes or other people's approval, or
totally
those like, and that's, I don't know, I feel old because like the idea that you only exist to as other people's entertainment, if you will, and not even like stimulation, like art. I think, you know, music and art, and especially with like going back to Memory Bank, like it's a piece of art that can sustain you, that you can really get into and emotionally connect with, as opposed to being entertained by. And I think those are very different things. Being entertained,
two totally different things.
And
like one of them is like coming from a source of like introspection, and the other is coming from like exuding that, you know, and like getting it out. That's why the world needs entertainers. I mean, you know, like and fucking, I don't know, man. David Byrne does it like he's right in that fucking middle, and he is like a legend because he's both, and he's just beautiful. You know?
And that's rare. You know, the ability to straddle both lines is exceedingly rare. You know, you think like David Bowie, or you know, there's a lot of people that almost have two sides to them, that they're both incredibly intelligent and strategic, but also incredibly emotionally present and creative, and to be able to use those things in the right combination to present art in a way that is both deeply personal, impactful, but also entertaining. Like that's absolutely a crazy gift.
I mean, I've often, whenever I had that show a couple months ago, I mean, there was a lot of people there. It was a big show. And I, like afterwards, I mean, like during the set, I was like zoned in and I didn't look up and I didn't see anything, you know? And then afterwards, like it all came like flooding in all at once. It was pretty intense. And I was thinking like, oh, dude, next time I want somebody else on stage with me. If it's just one other person, you know, like I can't like take all that at once, because that's it's a lot, you know. I'm not like, I don't know, maybe it's not like my personality or something.
No, I mean it's all valid, you know. How it affects you in the way that it does and what you want to do with it, it's all, and that's, you get to do that, you get to have those decisions. And that's, you know, I've seen some people that I work with here where they'll have another person on stage with them that does like live visuals. So they'll sort of perform with the music with them on stage as a another performance, if you will, within a performance.
Yeah. To create one cohesive like experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. After I got done with the whole, or like, you know, hung up my hat, as they say, for fucking the music thing, which I didn't really. Nobody worry, I'm fucking got shit planned. But I turned to visual art and like live, like, you know, like video synthesizers and using like an instrument like to create visuals, and that shit's fucking awesome.
It sounds like, you know, whatever this next phase for you ends up being, that you have multiple ways to express yourself at this point, to, you know, put something out there that is going to be really interesting. And at the end of the day, it's got to be interesting for you mostly. But that, to me, seems like a very exciting prospect of what the next thing could be.
I'm a little scared of leaving people behind, though. I want the people who felt anything from anything that I've made to like come on this fucking journey with me, you know? Like, I really appreciate anybody who has been moved by anything I've ever done, you know? It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a thing.
That's where social media could come in handy for me. I could let my fans
I used to think really kind of like, when I was younger, like, I don't like this album, and I'd get kind of upset, like, because a band releases an album that I don't like in the moment and I don't understand. But what I realized is, like, I was not in the emotional state or the maturity level to understand what that person was saying. Like, you know, as artists move and develop, they release things that are in their current state, and sometimes it hits people exactly in the right spot, and like it's a time in a moment. It could be societal, or it could be very personal. And then, but as I've gotten older and kind of revisited albums from artists that maybe like I wasn't hot on 10, 15, 20 years ago, now I'm like, this is my most favorite. Like, example for me is like, I didn't really like The Fragile when it came out. I didn't understand. I was just in a completely different space. And as I got older, I've come back to appreciate that album so much. And it wasn't a bad album, wasn't you know, I think it wasn't for me in that moment. And I think when you release music, it's like, some people aren't going to vibe with it because maybe they're just not in that spot of when you release the other
Totally,
stuff,
dude.
and that's okay. It'll come
Oh, yeah,
back.
dude.
And clearly, like, Memory Bank is released and people are discovering it and they're coming back to it. People still resonate with it. And I think if you release the music that is truest to you and your intent and who you are, then, you know, people are going to keep coming along because it's still you doing the thing that is the reason why people are there.
Fuck yeah. Right. Yeah. And, well, I remember, I mean, dude, in high school, like, Modest Mouse, my favorite band of all fucking time.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, so teenage angst, you know, and fucking anger and the sadness was so much on my level. Loved it. And then, like, We Were Dead Before the Ship Even Sang came out, and they got Johnny Marr playing guitar and, like, changed the whole sound. And I was like, all right, like, they fucking betrayed me. You know, and it was just like, oh no, at that time I only liked the really sad angsty music because I was sad and angsty. It didn't mean anything to Isaac Brock. Like, it meant everything to me, you know, like, it had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with me, you know, and maybe he started making, like, happier music because he was no longer a teenager in angst, you know?
Yeah, occupying
people grow, you know.
When you in some of those spaces, you can only occupy them for so long. They're just because I think could be really bad and cancerous, you know. And moments of melancholy in life happen, and tragedy happens to people. But you know, I don't think we're meant to permanently live in that state.
No. I mean, dude, especially like, well, okay. Whenever I was like, I mean, in doing the whole fucking mental fucking gymnastics, man, like, I was thinking, like, do I even want to get better? Like, if I got better, I lose my edge. And maybe, like, that's the only thing that I had going for me is, like, the pain that I have makes me write music that can move people or something. As opposed to, like, me being, like, mentally on top of myself, knowing that, oh, I still remember what it feels like to feel that way. I'm going to write a beautiful song about it. You know?
Yeah.
It's so different than just, like, being, like, such a, like, a feeler, man. Like, you feel shit in your body and it feels like it's everything, you know?
Absolutely. So we're a good way in. Is there anything that we should cover? Anything that you want to talk about before we wrap up and bring it all together?
I would like to give my support out there to all those people who are trying their hearts out, trying to make something, and let them know that patience is fucking everything, and do things that you love, be humble, and be kind.
Very wise words. Well, thank you, John. I really appreciate it. Till next time, this is Eric. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
It's a motherfucking paradise arcade.